We're back with Lila Rose. She is the president of Live Action, a pro-life organization that documents Planned Parenthood violations. She is on wanted posters in... Have you ever walked in and they've caught you at Planned Parenthood?
No, but I have walked in and seen my photo on the wall while I was undercover, and thankfully they did not recognize me. So that was pretty startling to see my face on their wall and posing as an underage girl, but they just went right ahead and covered up the sex abuse and definitely didn't notice that it was me.
How many people have gone to like a tea party or something in the last 2 years, or done something that's out of their comfort zone that you... Because I've done a lot of stuff out of my comfort, stuff that I never saw myself doing, you know, just a few years ago, right? Okay. Most likely it wasn't putting a hidden camera in your bag and dressing up as a 13-year-old girl, and you, sir, would look good as a 13-year-old girl. Dressing up as a 13-year-old girl and going in, what, how did you do that? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, first of all, Glenn, we're talking about research that's been done for years in the pro-life movement and real cases, court cases, cases that have come up in the news of girls who've been sexually abused, taken to abortion Planned Parenthood clinics, and it's covered up. So when I started finding out about this when I was 18 and learning about it, being very active in pro-life work, working with a pro-life group, a pro-life club at UCLA, I thought we need visual evidence of this. So that's been a progression of trying to get that visual evidence. And at the end of the day, any risk or any fear or any getting out of your comfort zone to do this investigative work is worth it, because we're exposing what's happening in these clinics every day, and people need to know about it.
Did you walk out at the beginning and go, oh my gosh, I have it on tape and the world won't believe this?
Definitely, when I walked out of the first clinic after getting that on tape, I remember thinking, I can't believe she said that.
Right.
And then thinking, people need to see this.
Okay, but have you been shocked at the silence and the unwillingness of the press to really know?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think there were some times where I was surprised that so few people seemed to care, but that was traditional media. And as a young person and our organization uses social media, it uses new media, independent media, that's where it's at these days, because a lot of those gatekeepers, the traditional media, they just won't talk about things that matter sometimes. And our generation is fed up with it, and so we're taking it to the internet, to Facebook, we're taking it to blogs, YouTube, and we're telling the stories that need to be told. So that's what our organization does.
I have to tell you, I'm as a member of the mainstream media, and
no offense to you.
No, we suck. Even on this network, which is the only network that would do an hour on this, I wonder what the ratings will be like. I wonder what the pushback will be like, not in the building, but outside of the building, because nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to know.
They want to look away.
Yeah, I said to somebody who actually was the designer of the rendition project, and I disagree with rendition. If you're going to torture somebody, have the cojones to torture them yourself in your name. And if people who say, I just don't want to know about it, they're doing it in your name. If you can walk in and stand by somebody who they're performing torture or abortion, and you can stand in the room, you might walk out and say, that was the worst experience of my life, but thank you for doing that. Well, then you've thought of it, and that's up to you. That's your choice. But to say, I don't even want to think about it, I don't care what they do, that's what leads to mass murder, because people don't pay attention. Back in just a second. We're back with Lila Rose. She is the president of Live Action, and Congress right now is talking about, should we fund abortions and should we fund Planned Parenthood, which that's the same thing. Let me go to Brent, and I'm sorry, Brent, what's your wife's name?
Ambia.
Ambia, you had a question.
Yes, Nancy Skinner had said in an interview that we had seen online that Planned Parenthood does not accept federal funding for abortions, but only for reproductive health. Is there any proof? How do they prove that? How do they differentiate that?
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say you're against torture. Say you're staunchly against all torture. and somebody says, well, we're not going to pay you. I'm not going to take your money and pay for torture. I'm just going to pay for the room, the water, the lighting, and the heat or refrigeration, whichever we prefer. Are you paying for torture or not?
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
I mean, is there a difference?
And every dollar that is given to this organization is funding the behavior of the employees that you see on tape. Every dollar.
How many of these videos did you have to make? Like that first video that you made, how many clinics did you have to go in before you got somebody to do that?
First one I ever walked into, Glenn, when I was 18, I walked in and I said, you know, he's 24 or 23, I'm 15, what do I do? It was statutory rape. And they said, just figure out a birth date that works, lie on the paperwork. First clinic. Second clinic, similar things. Third clinic, similar, and beyond. It's almost every single time.
Connie.
Yes, hi, Glenn.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Well, I had asked why, if it were just rogue employees of Planned Parenthood that did this, or the higher-ups. You had mentioned managers, and now I'm thinking the higher-up would be the government, but it doesn't surprise me what they do with our tax dollars, so
No.
question answered.
I mean, how could it be? I mean, that's what they always try to do. That's why, quite honestly, that was the excuse of Acorn, and that's why many times they threw those employees of Acorn right under the bus. But I mean, that started with the Rathke boys. I mean, that was all the way from the top. Have you ever caught a head person?
Well, managers, practitioners, you know, the top nurse. But beyond that, we've seen top-level executives like the vice president executive, Stuart Shearer, saying that the behavior on the tape is professional, saying that this is professional care, that they're providing all the options to the pimp about how he can sell the girls on the street, etc. That's
Well,
how.
if you define professional as doing something for money, yes, it is professional. Back in just a second. Nels Robinson is from Montana. He says he is a conservative and a constitutionalist, but
I'm having I have a hard issue with the aspect of like a rape case or violence, something like that. As a conservative, what other conservatives feel about, you know, abortion in that case.
So you're kind of with me that you are so strong on this, except you get fuzzy when it, right?
Yes.
And most people are like that. How do you answer that?
Let's take a crack at that. So first of all, I want to talk about my friend Rebecca. And she's a pro-life speaker, and she was the victim, the product of a rape. But she's just as much a human being as you or I are. So that the first thing there is that the unborn children that are conceived by violence of the rape, that is not their fault. That's the fault of their father, who's a criminal who needs to be put behind bars, etc. But the other aspect here is the solution to the pain of a rape or incest victim an abortion? Is abortion something that they're going to, 10, 15, 20 years later, going to be happy that it happened to them? Is that going to take away the suffering of their rape? And I think you'll talk to rape victims and the ones that have bravely chosen to go through with the pregnancy and give that child a chance, and they're not going to say, oh, I wish I'd had an abortion. They're going to say, wow, that was a redemptive part of this suffering. That was something that helped to redeem it. But abortion adds more violence to that violent act of rape.
I will tell you another argument. Another argument for it would be, well, he's got the genes. You know, that child's got the genes of a rapist. And that goes back to eugenics. That goes back to the argument, well, you got to get rid of them because they're imbeciles or they're criminals, and they'll always be criminals. And as Oliver Wendell Holmes said, you know, isn't 3 generations of imbeciles enough? Does that help at all?
That helps.
Let me leave you with one more story, and we'll do that next. Now, I told you at the beginning of the program that it's a subject that we have to talk about, and we have to each ponder and really think hard. Here I am, a guy who says, I can't imagine my daughter being raped or involved with incest and having to choose and tell her, no, you've got to have the baby. I think of my daughter. But then I think of somebody else. This guy. My son, who was born from a 14-year-old girl, without getting into any of the details. She was a brave girl. My son was born of a superhero. He doesn't need anybody with a cape. He has the woman who gave birth and then did a brave thing, gave him to us. He is a joy. I told you the story also of Joseph P. Kennedy. His daughter, Rosemary, had a lobotomy because she was an imbecile. And people used to be ashamed, and people wants to shut people up. My oldest daughter was born with cerebral palsy. And had I not been wise, had they given me a choice, I probably, at my age at that time, would have said, oh, well, it won't be any quality of life. Well, the truth is, if I would have done that, my quality of life would have been much, much lower. I've learned more from her and from him than any professor I could have ever had. From New York, good night, America.